Hello, 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 everybody. Architecture Talk Time with Sarah Colata. It's a little bit of a guerrilla show today, not normally on time, but we had a bit of a thing going on from last week. So I've got Daplaah-Teng with me today, an
Hey,
architect also from Berlin, just where I am. So that's exciting. We're in the same city, and we're going to talk a little bit about architecture, about architectural profession, and also his journey as an architect. So welcome, Daplaah. Thank you so much for joining me.
thank you for having me.
It's excellent. And tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey as an architect.
Okay, I'll start right from the beginning. I was born in the UK. I grew up in Ghana, so I'm a Ghanaian, and then when I was for university, I went to Australia to study architecture. So I did my bachelor and master's in Australia. Then one thing led to another, and I ended up in Berlin. Worked for a architecture firm when I first came. Then after that, I worked for a series of real estate companies. So right now I'm at the stage where I left my real estate company last year, and I'm trying to develop ideas in this sort of real estate architecture space.
Interesting. So real estate kind of just came about randomly, or did you choose it as a career shift?
Actually, it was my old boss, the first job I had in the architecture office. He sort of recommended it, like, hey, have you thought about going to real estate or combining it, doing something together with architecture? And I was just like, no, I'm an architect. I want to design buildings. I want to do the conventional way of doing things. Designing, building, and I just thought, yeah, okay. So I stayed there for a bit, but after a while, one thing led to another. Then I just ended up in real estate. But then I saw the opportunity, and I just rolled with it. So yeah, that's where I ended up now. And I think through that, other sort of ideas and stuff have opened up for me.
So interesting. I'm
Yeah.
always fascinated to hear about career pivots because obviously I really believe that architecture is so multidimensional that you can really find yourself in a lot of different things. But
Mhm.
a lot of times when people change, even slightly, they see it as a failure. So
Mhm.
was it hard for you, or was it like an exciting shift?
Well, I think for most people, it was at the beginning, I'll say, a bit confrontational in the sense that for me personally, I thought I was kind of betraying what I had learned, because
Exactly. Interesting you say that.
when you're in architecture school, you're taught, or you can become a designer like Zaha Hadid, Norman Foster, Ram Koolhaas, So when you get to that stage, when you finish, you graduated, you're now in the marketplace, you're working. And if there's any sort of thing that confronts or challenges that notion, it's confrontational. You think through certain things like, oh, this is not what I want to do, what I've been trained to do. And sometimes you think it's a waste of training because you've been trained in this way. But after a while, you need to give yourself that space to actually think and explore as to what you really want to do. And for me, yes, at the beginning, it was challenging, like, oh, this is not what I want to do. I want to design buildings, I want to become the next great architect. But I heard a story that it's only less than, I'll say less than, but it's about, I had a story, a stat, it's not a direct stat, but about 10% of people actually make it to the normal foster level, and I think architecture, as you said, I believe for me, it's a way of thinking about certain things, how you can apply your skills in other areas. So it doesn't have to be in design and buildings, it could be in various fields. And as an individual, you just need to explore that, sit down and try and figure out what you really want to do. Because at the end of the day, the reality is not everybody's going to design buildings as architects, Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. And I also think that this general idea that like when you move away from architecture, it's a failure and that you're
Mhm.
betraying your path is so strong that
Yeah.
we're just scared to change. It's a fear. And yet you see real estate is not really that far from architecture. And I know that now you married the two in a way in which you look for solutions for better living environments. So it really enriches, in a way, the work that you do right now in real estate, because you have that perspective coming from architecture and always looking into ways in which you can better the living environment for your client, for the people, for the user. And so I really believe that when we diversify, we find new ways in which we can actually apply our vast knowledge and that eye that we have for improvement in also other areas that we work in. So it's really an addition, but not many people see it like that. So tell me a little bit more about that experience now, and how did you find the two combined working together?
Okay, so I'll give you an example. In real estate, you have a typical role as the asset manager, right? And asset managers normally come from a finance background. So developers will normally come from like, not all the time, but a lot of the time they come from a financial background. And as I said, asset managers, right? So the asset, which is the real estate or project or building or whatever, it's sort of commoditized, right? So everything they process, the way they think about things is through this filter, that it's numbers, right? So when it comes to thinking outside the box, right, they think through that lens. But imagine if you are an architect as an asset manager, right? You're not just thinking through a financial lens, you're thinking through a design lens and an architectural lens, right? So when you are planning ideas or strategies or things that can improve the asset, you are thinking through this sort of multi-dimensional framework, you know, whereas, as I said, with asset managers, it's just to, you know, okay, how can this increase the value of the building, you know? But with an architect, you can say, okay, you know what, if I do this way as an architect, it can, yes, increase the value of a building, but also it can increase the value, like the experience and the quality of life in the building, you know? So I think it's amazing because you find that a lot of asset managers, what they do is the architect comes on board as a consultant, you know, which is fine. But what happens is you are sort of constrained, you know, the asset manager tells you what he wants, the architect produces it, and then that is just like there's a back and forth. But generally, you go with what the asset manager says, you know, and it's always an advantage to have that sort of angle. Another example is perhaps like a developer, right? Developer is more rounded, you know, he deals with all the stages of a development, of course. And the thing is, as a developer, it's finance, right? It's about how do I get my returns back, you know? So for him, what he's getting from the architect is what the architect is telling him. So, but if you are a developer with an architectural background, you can start thinking about things differently. Another case is if you are like somebody who works in the city council, you know, and you are an architect, you understand when somebody brings a building proposal, you know how to question and understand the project because you have an architectural background, you know. So there are so many ways in which an architect can actually contribute to the built environment, you know. Say, for example, we both live in Berlin. Imagine, and Berlin has big housing issues, you know, a massive housing shortage. So imagine if you had like all these people who are in influential positions in the city council, who have a background in architecture, right? And I'm not saying they are not there, but if there was like this sort of awareness, like, okay, architects in the city council, then we're able to think about problems creatively, you know, not just in this box where somebody brings something, oh, this is not how we do things, but you're able to actually think creatively because that's what you did when you were studying. You had to think about things creatively, you know? So I definitely think that there's immense opportunities in different fields for architects if they will take them. Yeah.
Absolutely. I really think so. And, you know, it all really starts with us. I mean, there is a huge dropout rate in architecture. And the big reason behind it is because architects get huge disappointment when they go to practice and they realize that it's not all about just being a visionary and work with these utopian ideas of reality, but actually a lot of documentation and drawing and detail drawing and all that stuff. And a lot of people realize that that's not really how I imagine this to work. And I'm not the greatest CAD monkey, so what do I do? And really, when we have that issue of like dropping out, or a lot of times we get really scared as to what could we do, because the idea that if I don't do architecture, I'm just burned, you know, I'm a failure or whatever. But instead of realizing that actually it's an enrichment to almost every single industry, and pretty much, I mean, first of all, it's never too late. But also another thing is that we can actually be also seen as an asset on the team as we move industries and go into a different field, because we have that other outlook and approach. And I think that a lot of business people and people all together can appreciate that, and people more and more build diverse teams. So it's not just like, for example, in your example, it's not just that financial outlook onto real estate, but also looking into other aspects that are more human friendly, and having that diversity of thoughts in the leadership, or even in the work load of the company. It's really important to be able to deliver like more diverse projects as well, and run the business in a more diverse way. So I think that it really matters, and it's interesting to take that opinion as to, I'm actually rich coming into a different industry because I have all that background, rather than to be scared to transition or feel like failure with architecture.
Exactly. And you know, great point. Exactly. But I think also with architecture, what architecture teaches you is then the nature of the way it's taught, you know, is one of, you know, you are this very qualified person, you know a lot about the industry, the built environment, which is true. I always say this, right? Architects are the most knowledgeable when it comes to the built environment, you know. But the thing is, the reality of the situation is there are other players now. So in that sense, architects are not the most influential in the sense of decision making, you know.
That's
because
true.
You have the developer, you have the asset manager, you have the person on the city council, and there's politics too, you know. And in my experience, what I've found is there's a sort of arrogance, right, that comes with. I don't mean it in a bad way. It's just the reality of the situation, right? As architects, there's this sort of, we have this mindset like, we know all these things, we are knowledgeable and stuff. You need us, you know. So whereas the reality outside is, hey, wait a minute, like we have these things happening here, you know, and you are supposed to consult with us, you know. So there's this sort of clash, because architects have this sort of, I call it gatekeeping, you know. We have this area that is supposed to be important, you know, which should be, but the way the world has changed and evolved over the last 60, 70, 80 years, right, in terms of how projects are run and stuff, has created this condition where although architects are important, there are other important players too, as I was saying, the asset manager and the developer, because they have the money, construction managers, project managers. And it comes out to this thing about the risk, you know, higher risk, higher reward, you know. So if you look at a project, right, if you're running a project, where the risk, the highest part of the project where the risk is high is the actual execution of the project, actual on-ground work, builders on site, building the walls, you know, the trusses and all these things. And these things have risk attached to them, right? And construction managers are the ones that take on the risk. Their job is to manage the risk, not to eliminate, but to manage the risk. And I think the evolution of the architecture profession has been one where, I mean, back in the day, if you go back to the days of Christopher Wren, it was the master builder. So you had all these sort of components into one as an architect. The architect was the master builder. But today you have a construction manager, the project manager, all these little things that have sort of siphoned off. Exactly. And also you have this evolution of real estate as an asset class, because before the 70s, before they call it Reaganomics, President Reagan, he liberalized the economy in the States, and Margaret Thatcher liberalized the economy in Great Britain. Before then, the post-war era, the government was more or less the guarantor of projects. Because it was post-war, lots of projects, because there was a boom in the population, housing, everything. Then the 70s came around and things changed, But then the thing is, architecture is, I believe, that is still stuck in this framework where we're still in the 50s and 60s, where we feel like, okay, we should be doing all these projects. But it's not like that now.
No.
And yeah. So it is an interesting, yeah.
And I think that there's definitely a lot of truth to what you say, because there is definitely this concept and talks about a disappearing industry. And I think that we are sort of a slowly declining industry because there is a lot of replacement in the market to our services. So for example, let's look at IKEA. A lot of times they don't even need architects in order to, revitalize your whole apartments. So up till today, a big chunk of architectural money comes from actually interior design projects, or even just, refurbishment and this sort of stuff. But you have big, big sort of monopoly style businesses that come in and monopolize completely the industry. And by quick solution, it's all made to measure. You can have a bunch of technicians do it. You don't even have to have any permits or anything. It takes the job away from architects that used to be quick cash, because working on, refurbishment or just house renovation is it's a quick cash. It's not like a 5 to 10 year really big build project. And a lot of architecture, especially in the city offices, basically rely on their income coming from that. So there is that. And then obviously development does sort of something like that, but on the architectural big scale, right? So developers come in with their own solutions. They're sort of made to measure. They're all like one solution fits all kind of model a lot of times. And of course, we know that there is a lot of problems that come with these solutions that you mentioned. They're like less kind of conscious of the society, the needs of the human being, etc. There's definitely been issues like that in London. And I think that there's been new regulations that came in through the RIBA about this, because they've been building buildings where they separated the room into so many different rooms that there were actually spaces with no windows that people lived in. And that's crazy for a city like London. But obviously that's a developer's solution, thinking about money, how to basically make the most money on the metrage, and not always the good outcome that can come from it for the client, so or the user. So there's definitely that. And I think that with more and more these kind of solutions emerging in the market, the role of an architect diminishes. This is why it's even more important for us to really assert our value and communicate the value that we hold to our immediate environment, to our clients, and to the general public. And I think that there's been a debate surely about how to do it best. And I think that even the RIBA actually within the UK is looking into ways to educate general public about the value of an architect. But I really believe that the biggest change that we can implement is by actually realizing our own value first, because it's us who go out there communicating with clients. It's all us who go out there establishing relationships. And if we don't somehow protect our value, our income, and for how much we sell our services and all that stuff, then we communicate that we're a commodity, and commodity can be replaced by another commodity. So if we ourselves don't assert that value and say, okay, here is the limit, and I just won't go lower than that, or I won't work on this kind of conditions or others, we have to protect also the experience of the user as we represent this experience through our design, and basically are this sort of mediatories between the idea and the way the user will kind of interact with it. So this is all kind of what it always comes back to is your personal perception as the designer of the work that you do and taking responsibility for it. And I think that there is still 2.7 million architects around the world. That is still a significant number, even though in the global economy and the amount of people in the world, we're not big. Like this isn't a huge chunk of economy or whatever. And definitely a slowly disappearing sector. However, very much important, and it does protect so many things, and it represents so many things, like the user experience and the dignity of living in dignified conditions, which every human being has a right for. Even in cities like London, we're not even talking about the third world, and dignity, human dignity provided by livelihood there. We're talking about big cities, metropolis that are basically every day facing either a shortage of housing like it is in Berlin, but also issues with housing in London, where development doesn't meet human rights almost, I would say, in some cases. And surely that is on the hands of the RIBA, but also individual architects, I think. So in a way, it's really to protect it as architects. We should protect it, but also I think to grow in confidence, to be able to diversify, learn more from other industries, and push back. So if there are industries that are coming into architecture and sort of stealing our role in society, we can push back and reclaim our role by finding new diverse ways in which we can interact with society and provide solutions, because there's innovation in so many different departments, and in mobility and in business and in marketing and so many different topics. But even though we're trained to be innovating and be visionaries, sometimes we don't actually, we're too scared to kind of expand. I feel.
Sorry.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, it's exactly right. Again, as I said, there's this. I feel that my perspective is that there seems to be this. Once you study, right, there's this idea of this is the domain of the architect, right? Is this domain that we have? So if I were to visualize it, right, you come out of university, right, you go into the workplace, right, and in the workplace there's this sort of carved out section just for architects, So it's this sort of secured place, which is guaranteed for your career, I think that's the mentality. Like, so when things are not going, I was like, these people don't understand, they don't value design, they don't value architecture. But the reality is, things are changing, things are evolving quickly. I remember my favorite architect is Remco Haas. He said something like, I read in one of his articles, he was saying that the job of the architect, right, is to haggle with the realities. Right? So there are economic, political, technological, and financial realities. The job of an architect is to haggle with those realities. It's not, if you look at the architects of old, this is immediately after the war, World War II. You had a boom of all these sort of modernist programs, or people who are doing crazy stuff like the metabolists in Japan, what is possible, crazy ideas, which was a great time, But the thing is, that was then, and even good ideas cost money, So back then you could have, if you're an architect, perhaps you could have unfettered access to maybe projects, funding, because the government was secure those things. But now, since the private sector, real estate, is more or less the dominant player when it comes to lots of projects the architects do, it's a very different thing. So I believe there's this sort of disconnect with what the architect can do and what he is doing and what the developer wants, or what the people in this mainstream or in the industry want. I'll be honest. I remember when I started working in real estate, I had a meeting with we had a meeting. I was working for a real estate company, as I said. We had a meeting with other real estate companies to organize this competition, right, for an architectural competition for a project in Mitte. It was finished a few years ago. And these guys, there was a list of, the competition was organized, there was a list of all these architects. And these are the big shots, you know, in Berlin. And you think that, oh man, because as architects, man, these are like the top guns, you know. They are the Norman Forsters of Germany. I don't want to name anybody, but they had these sort of big shot architects. And these guys were just like going like, nope, these guys, no, we don't want to work with them because they have problems with the city council, or these guys are like this, and this is what's happening here. And there was another project where a big firm in Berlin was quite, you know, everybody wants to work for them. And one big developer told me that for them, they are having problems selling their units because the way they design a building is not conducive for people to live in or to sell at that rate, you know.
Wow.
So you see that disconnection here, where the architect has his mind, he has his design, he knows what he wants to do, but then the reality is, right, there's a financial aspect to it, you know. And if these things are meeting, then there's a sort of discrepancy. And also to touch on your point on this sort of claiming back with the field, I think you are right, because for me, I wouldn't say even claim. Maybe this way we might slightly disagree, or maybe it's just different ways we're wording things. But I'll say that with architects need to start figuring out other sources of other ways in which they can use their skills pragmatically in the industry, because what a lot of people don't know is there's a lot, because this sector is possibly the last sector, real estate or construction, or as you say, AEC, you know, architecture, engineering, construction as a broader term, is the last field to be, what do they call it? To be, I've forgotten the word, when you want to innovate something, disrupted. Is the last field to be disrupted. Yeah. So there are a lot of firms in the PropTech scene who are trying to change the way people design and build and stuff. And it was fun because I was on a platform once for architects, and somebody was talking about, there was this software that came up with AI, you know, how to design floor plans with AI. And everybody was going on like, hey, you know what? This will never happen. You know, design is about, you know, humane aspects of things, trying to figure out people's it's creativity. You know, you can't, if I should use the word, creativize AI processes, because AI is data and creativity is spontaneous, comes out of the head. And I was saying, like, that's not the point. That's not the point. The point is, this thing is here, and this is only the first stage. Who knows what this is going to do in 10, 15, 20 years time? You know,
yeah, absolutely.
It may very well be able to design a very functional home, which is convenient, and the owners or the people who live there love it, you know?
Yeah.
So again, there's this gatekeeping mindset that this is our field, and AI, nope, you're not going to work here. This is what we do. We are creative and stuff. So what's happening is there's only the gate happening. The walls are gone, and we're just standing at the gate, gatekeeping, making sure that, oh, nobody comes and takes our field. But it's happening. You know, and architects just need to think differently, and, you know, find different ways of apply their skills and what they know, because it's very valuable in solving problems in the built environment or wherever, you know.
Yeah, it's so valuable, and it's a great skill. And I know that in business, it's a seeked for skill, because it's more that those personal skills that matter, rather than so much the training. You know, you can always train people, but the thing is, problem solving, for example, is a huge. It's a really good example for that as well, because a lot of people will choose problem solvers over, like, for certain group combinations, right? In a business, you want that. You want a different outlook and ability to do that. And I think I think that diversity can really help for architects to keep doing architecture, but also spread, and likewise to keep this through innovation, keep the industry growing. And that really is in our own hands if we run practices to look for innovation rather than corner ourselves and limit ourselves to thinking that if you spread into AI or whatever it is, that you're taking away from the spontaneity. Well, if you think about it, parametric design does that. It's using data to design, and yet it comes up with a lot of creative solutions. And of course, there's a lot of people that don't approve of it, but it also found it's very, very, I think, justified usage to simulation, into environmental simulation, optimization of design. So there is a lot of ways in which you can use that tool to actually, to actually optimize what you're doing and help your human brain see things a little bit differently. And so that same goes to AI and to a lot of other fields, but just this idea of us going out there and meeting that field, it's really what we're talking about here. So it's about individually you saying, yeah, I am interested in this topic and I will explore. And this is where the innovation happens. And I think we need more of this to push these boundaries of the industry, and keep it growing as well. And that's in internal desires and interests. So following your desire, following your interest, developing skills, and with that really growing and pushing the boundaries of the industry forward.
Exactly. And it's also about I think it's kind of ironic in the sense that architects, we are supposed to be creative, but when it comes to this, we are kind of hesitant. We don't want to let go of our zone or our areas. But I honestly think this is an amazing time to branch out. I had a friend who had a friend who studied architecture but went into medical engineering. Mm-hmm. So he used his skills as in 3D modeling and data to develop prototypes or these sorts of amateurs for medical processes, maybe for surgery and all these things. Lots of architects are going into UX design,
yes,
because it's a way, user experience. Who's the best person who knows how to use space? It's an architect. So applying those skills into a different area. People who are going into business who did maybe an undergrad or a master's in architecture and then they did an MBA or something, and they're applying their skills in real estate or whatever. I think the opportunities and the potential is massive. The thing is, we just need to shake our ideas a bit, shake the tree a bit, and see where we can actually go. Even in architecture, I mean, even what you're doing, what you're doing yourself, it's innovative in a sense. You're helping other architects become better at what they do. And for me, that's the main thing I took away from my schooling. It just manifested itself years later, but it's this idea that how can I apply my architectural thinking, skills, or how to solve problems creatively into other areas. It could still be in architecture, or it could be in real estate, or it could be in finance, agriculture, or whatever. I have a friend, right? Her background is civil engineering, but she's a venture capital investor because she's really good at numbers. Because when you're working as a VC, you really have to look at numbers, projections, and that sort of thing. And she's now a VC investor. So she analyzes portfolios and figures out how to make them better, and develops, like, organizes funding for them and stuff. She's also in that field.
Tell her that we need more venture capital in architecture to sponsor innovation. An innovative project. Maybe she wants to set up a fund that can help architects basically grow innovative ideas, because we don't have venture capital being invested into architecture. And I think it's a bummer.
No, but you see, this is the thing, right? When as an architect, right? Architects, right? In the process of doing something, a project, right? Design is an investment, right, in a project. So if you're coming from a developer or an asset manager or that perspective of things, right? Design is not, it's actually costing you money. You know, it's not, you don't see the immediate outcome. And you and I and architects know that the better the way a building is designed, the better the quality, of course, the prices go up or whatever. I'm just talking about the scheme of things, right? Because quality of living is important, right? So for me, the way I see it is if architects can come up with a way of how they can actually create actual value that is convincing to those people who have access to capital, then you see that. And even you have lots of investors in this space. Well, it's not directly in architecture, but it's in the context space, construction technology, prop tech. You know, they are there, but directly in architecture.
But as you say, it's all about value and knowing where to go with this. So if you come up with a really good solution, basically that provides value and is venture capital ready and it's justified to get the funding, why not? And so definitely there is that potential. It's just that, again, which architects will come up with it if they don't even know about venture capital, which is the case. I think a lot of architects don't understand how basically businesses get funded in other industries because simply they don't have that knowledge about business. And so it comes a little bit as a shock. Like it definitely, I had that aha moment in my life, that when I realized how tech businesses get funded or mobility businesses get funded. And I was like, wait a minute. Oh my God, you can actually be like 22 and come up with an idea and get funding? Because in architecture, believe that we have to have a rich family to commission our first project, otherwise it's really hard to make it.
And also with architecture, right, you are totally right. That's the first revelation I had when I moved into real estate. This idea of when it comes to business, that's not a strong point at all when it comes to architecture. And for some reason we feel that when you're in school, right, you think, okay, I'm going to study, get my degree or whatever, work for a bit, then go into practice. That's the dream of everybody, because everybody at the end of the day wants to go into private practice. You're your own boss, you're doing all these great designs, the world is just, it's great. The reality is that it doesn't really happen like that, because there's a business side of things. Because architecture, whilst it's a passion, it's also a business. Because you have to get clients. Because in order to grow, it's like a self-reinforcing thing. You have to have a good business plan to do good design. You have to have good design to have a good business. It's a self-reinforcing thing. And I don't think, when I was in school, at least I can only speak for myself, I didn't get any sort of business thing. All we got was I think the last semester we had to come up with this business plan, and there was nothing about numbers and how to do marketing and things that really matter. And you find that a lot of architects, when they get to this stage, they realize that, okay, how do I do this? What's going on? And it's almost as if these things have to work out themselves, because I'm an architect. The world will want my designs. The world will want me to do all these things. It doesn't happen like that. Unfortunately, you have to justify certain things. I'll give you an example. What I love to do is I love to study architecture firms, today. And I'll just give a few examples. So, for example, if you take Bjarke Ingels Group, big, right? If you look at the structure, the reason why they are so successful is not because it's luck. It's the way they structured the company. It's like a normal business. They have a CEO and they have lots of partners, right? If you look at OMA has a branch called AMO, right? So they're able to it helps for their business model. They're able to understand and build a sort of research framework around their projects, which works for them. Now, Foster has a specialist modeling group, which is a private, it's a side thing which helps build like these sorts of innovative models with 3D models and stuff. They use it for the Beijing airport and stuff. You know, it was really innovative at the time. So if you look, a lot of these companies have actually gone and done the homework in terms of being a good design business that focuses on architecture, but also a business, they are into the business of architecture, if I were to put it like that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, I mean, it's just a great example. I think that this is really where the secret lays, because we really believe that, like, to be successful in architecture, it's about the quality of our design and hard work. But when you look at successful people, what they did, it's not, I mean, if you would say it's hard work, then how did Big work harder by the age of 20 something that he already made, you know, his first buildings happen? Like, he must have slept. It's not about hard work, you know, it's about smart work. It's about smart work.
Exactly, smart work, yes.
Whereas the smartness is in the systems. You know, if you want to scale and if you want to be seen by the big players, you cannot play small. Like, it's just, you're never going to get there because you're just going to be trying to get the attention of the wrong people. So it's really about how you strategize. And I think that after all, we can have all these different beliefs about how architecture doesn't teach us about business and all that stuff and all that stuff and all that stuff. Well, it was my story too. You know, I've also had a practice, and I also went there blindly as, you know, as a horse with, you know, just seeing this much. And I have had no idea what I'm doing for most of the part. But that was really the biggest kind of learning curve in business. And from that moment on, when I realized, okay, that's not the end of the journey, just making this work is not it. It's not enough. I want to learn more because I want to learn about scaling. And generally, this is the moment where someone just recommended for me to go into other fields and see what other fields are doing and what is their success path. And, you know, really, weirdly enough, that advice got me into digital transformation in the first place, because I realized that as I went to America and I started to study business people like Grant Cardone, Tony Robbins, like you name it, all these big people that made it in business, all they were doing is using digital transformation to position themselves to be seen, doing lives like what we're doing right now. And I was like, hold on a minute, is this maybe a secret? Like, does this teach me something? Because they might be saying, you know, they might be telling you all these things, but what they're doing is actually what makes their business work. And so I was like, could we interpret that and have this happen in architecture too? You know, and so studying people that started to create digital products in architecture, teach in architecture digitally by basically putting their expertise online and attracting the right type of customer, the right type of client, the right type of audience to themselves through the message that they have to give, and building their whole business around that. And when you really, like, only after I started to study that, I realized that this is actually something that Big did, because he started by publishing a book, which is a series of, like, it's like a manifesto, basically. Yes is more. It's a manifesto that he designed really well. He was really into drawing and comics and all this illustration stuff. And he published that before really he started to fully build and he became what he was preaching. The reason behind it is because there is a power in methodology. There is a power in design thinking, in something that you represent. And I think that uniqueness is a key to business. And when I watch what the successful people are doing, is they lead by expertise. And when you look at architects, we are experts. We are experts in whatever the heck you research for your MA, PhD, and BA all together, and then all the other years of work and study that you put into your path make you an expert. So why do we not take that and basically run with it and lead with it and build businesses around that, a business of expertise? And this is essentially what my aha moment was around this. And this is what I'm doing right now, is how can I base my whole business around my knowledge and what I know, what I've learned, my experience. And of course, for a lot of architects, I'm only 34, right? So for a lot of architects, I might be too young to even teach. But I can guarantee you that the big aha moments I had already on my journey have completely shifted my experience and also my perception of architecture. And I, through that, became more tenacious, but also more fluid with it all. I don't justify myself anymore through whether or not I practice architecture, because my whole life is architecture. Like, I literally talk about it and work in that field the whole time. However, I don't design as much as I used to. And the point is, you're not an architect only when you're design. Like, there is a lot of architects that have actually never really built their designs. They've just been writing incredible books and doing drawings, and they still make famous. So the point is, it's not about that. It's about what you represent, the ideology that you represent. And my dog is just going crazy. Sorry. So yeah, the point is that I think there is something really powerful in owning what you represent, your methodology, and really leading forward your practice, your business, your uniqueness as an expert, leading forward with that expertise. And essentially, all the work that I do is helping architects do that. And shameless plug, guys, find me on Facebook or write me a private message if you're interested to find out more. I'm happy to direct you to the right resources. But honestly, this is really what it's about, is you owning your own uniqueness, understanding what value you hold, and how can you stretch the boundaries of architecture into other industries and help people through what you do. And you might find that may bring better and much more promising financial fulfillment, simply because there might be resources outside of architecture that you can source from to grow your business, basically, like venture capital, for example. So don't see it as a failure to shift or to pivot, but rather as following your heart, following your identity, and just going for it, because the industry needs it. We talked about how it's a slowly disappearing industry, and the industry needs it. And I think that we're thirsty for more innovation in this industry, for sure.
I just wanted to touch on your point when you spoke about Bjarke Ingels big. It's interesting you said that, because it's totally true. Just for the people who are listening, right? For me, when I did a bit of research, as I said, when I was trying to figure out, where to go, and one of the people I looked at was, as I said, Bjarke Ingels, big. And the thing is, for him, he was. People I've seen a lot of comments on, like Art Daily and Design, that this guy is just a marketing, blah blah blah. He's just he doesn't do good design. But things, just look, as you say, look at the methodology. Right? Just look at the methodology. First of all, okay, let's give him credit where it's due. Bjarke Ingels, some of his most innovative projects are in Scandinavia. And the Scandinavians are very progressive when it comes to these things. So a lot of these projects he was doing in Denmark, you cannot do in Germany, right? But here's the thing. He understood that, okay, if I get traction there, I release books, yes, it's more, and all these, this idea of hedonistic sustainability and all these things, right, is going to capture a global audience. So right now, his project that he started with small projects in Denmark with plots, with I think Yande Smith, or I've forgotten his name, and he developed big, did all these crazy projects. Now he's building virtually in Germany. He's building in Germany, he's building in New York, he's building around the world. And if you look, he's also started these sort of side projects like big builds, projects that can actually engineer his designs, So right now, if a project comes up, he knows how to win these projects, So it's people will say, oh, he's a marketing gimmick. Fair enough, but he's doing worldwide projects.
This is something that I don't understand. Like, literally, the basis of business is marketing. If someone does it great, why don't you learn from them rather than criticize?
Exactly.
It's such a strange thing that we have in the industry, that people criticize success. Like, how many times have we heard architects speak badly about all these star architects who made it and be like, oh yeah, well, she this, she that, and criticizing the innovation, like how much criticism Zaha Hadid got just because she was shaping the buildings differently than you used to. I mean, so what, are we supposed to be visionaries that are following all the same path and doing the same things? Like, we are here trained to be innovators, you know? And
Yeah.
so, but somehow we don't step to that role. And this, I don't
Mm,
understand really what's the reason there, but like, I am really open to talk about this. And I actually, this is exactly what the show here is for, to have these
mm.
conversations that are a little bit on the edge of like this
The
obsolete
normal, yeah.
madness architecture
Mm,
really represents, and looking into other things, because my biggest inspiration for the reason why I pivoted, for the reason why I run my business and the way I do it and all I do is really inspiration that comes from other industries, and being just asking a question, why not me, why not architecture?
exactly. Exactly. You feel it, you hit it right on the nail, on the head there. Um, if you want to learn, you learn from other industries. Simple. If you want to
Absolutely.
innovate, you look at other like examples, and you take it from there. I just wanted to touch on the point you raised before, like why we criticize architects and people who've made it. And I think that the issue comes down to the fact that these architects, right, have figured out a way to actually, as I said, haggle with the realities on the ground. They are brilliant designers, that's true, but then they have all the things they've accrued all the necessary things to be able to execute, right? So marketing, these guys can sell you whatever. I mean, if you listen to how Norman Foster talks, I mean, he sells confidence. Like, I know what I'm doing, and I'm going to build the best project you can ever have. And it's everything that comes with the marketing, the prestige, the experience, everything. And he's built it over the years, not just design, not just thinking inside the box. You know, and this one thing I wanted to share with everybody too. I was watching this documentary on. It was an eye opener for me. Another eye opener. How much does a building weigh? It's by, I think it was by Norman Foster, a documentary, and he was asking, what's the name of this American engineer? I've forgotten his name. So in this documentary, Norman Foster was saying that with competitions, right, when it comes to winning competitions, because competitions are more or less the bread and butter of the architecture field. When you finish university, you want to do competitions to get your name out there. When your career starts snowballing, right? And he was saying that in competitions, they actually had to borrow money from the bank, sometimes more than £500,000 to enter a competition, right?
Wow.
And look at the risk involved here. If you lose, that's it. But
Oh
when you're
God.
in school, you don't know these things. You think, oh, it's a competition, you do this, you do that. Yeah. And that's what most people do. But it was an eye opener for me to understand that it's real. It's a business, that there's a risk involved, that if we don't win this, that's £500,000 down the toilet. And I'll see a majority of firms, I don't know if they'll be able to afford that, because that one project that can launch your career into the stratosphere can also sink you. So that's it. And this is what I'll say, right? This is how architects have been thinking. Like, competitions are one of these sort of pipelines in which I can get myself out there. No, it doesn't have to be just that. You could be doing different things. You could be innovating different ideas. You could come up with like some sort of. There's a company here in Berlin. What they do is I think it was started by an architect and somebody else. So what they do is it's pretty much an in-house project management company where you tell the person what you want, the amount of square meterage, blah blah blah, and then the AI sort of configures the house for you, and out of that, it can actually start selecting, like, developing the components, the walls, the windows, everything you need, right? So within a matter of, say, maybe seconds or minutes, you have a house. Then of course you have to go and do your permissions with the city council and stuff. But there's already these sorts of different ways of doing things, and I really encourage everybody to, if it's architecture you want to do, that's fine, but as you said, Sarah, it's about thinking. This platform is about for people thinking differently, and why not?
Absolutely. Thank you so very much. so
problem.
much for joining me on this talk. It was absolutely amazing. Also, really a great shout out to Francisco Fuentes, who's been sharing his thoughts. Thank you so much for being active and listening in and sharing so much great observations as well. We're here, you guys, and your interaction means so much for us as we show up as well. So thank you for being a part of this community, and thanks for tuning in. Click on the little bell below on YouTube just to get to subscribe and get notifications every single time we go live. And and subscribe to the channel, share with your friends. And thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.